Hey guys, welcome to InFoMaX. Today we're going to be talking about, are these countries? Really, we're going to be talking about 3 countries, although I have 5 different maybe countries up here. From England, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, China, and Palestine. China is obviously a country, but Taiwan and Hong Kong and Macau, and we'll get into that later. Okay, let's talk about England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, which all, of course, make up the UK. So, first of our rules here, as the rules aren't really clear, we have our own set of rules, not really following any rules. We have a mixed in bunch of rules from what people think should be a rule, to what the UN thinks should be a rule, to what the Olympics think should be a rule. And there's so many countries I could include up here. Like, I could have included, Puerto Rico, I could have included Kosovo, but I didn't. So, first of our rules is, do they actually have a border? No matter how small your border is, you do need to have a border. Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, and Wales all do have their own borders. You'll notice that I left out Wales on the title. That doesn't mean I forgot it. It just means Wales and England go hand in hand. So, moving on. Do they have a currency? Yes, they essentially do have a currency. Each of them have, while they all use the British pound sterling, each of them have their own currencies. In fact, I've heard that England has the right to refuse Northern Irish money. So, pretty interesting. Do they have a government? Yes, they do have a government. England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland all have a parliament with a prime or first minister. And last of all on this list is, do they have a permanent population? Yes, they do have a permanent population. England has about 84% of the United Kingdom population. Scotland has 8%. Wales has 3%. Well, not Wales. Northern Ireland has 3% of the United Kingdom population. Of course, as you can see, they all of these countries have a permanent population. So, we have one problem here. As I said, this was the final thing, and that's sort of the problem, because that's not the final requirement for my list. My final requirement is that they have countries that recognize them. But these don't have countries that recognize them, because essentially they don't want to leave the United Kingdom. Maybe they said something, and it's not like they're going to say something unless they actually want to leave. It's not like they're really going to say something. Scotland has done a few threats before. I mean, Scotland's like the most outspoken one, and Northern Ireland isn't even like a part of the United Kingdom. And I'm really sorry, Northern Ireland. It's just that everybody forgets that you're part of United Kingdom. I wouldn't be surprised if Northern Ireland left. I don't think they'd they'd join Ireland. I think they'd become a separate country, the Republic of Northern Ireland, or the Ronnie. Oh, that would be cool. Northern Ireland needs to leave the UK so they can be Ronnie or Roni, and then I can find some other initials and turn them into macaroni. Northern Ireland needs to leave the UK. Okay, that's a little outspoken. What if a political movement joined Roni? Yeah, I can see that happening. Moving on. Yeah, so essentially, officially, these are not countries. Really, think of it like a cell in an animal. An animal, you might say, is one living thing, but a cell is another living thing that makes up the living thing. So, kind of thinking of that in that way. So while it's not really a country by itself, it essentially is a country. Don't think about it too much, but do think about it, because Scotland, what would you even call Scotland's referendum? I mean, I know they've had it before, or it was either Scotland or Northern Ireland. Would you call it Scotsit? Skegsit? Wales would be Wexit. Northern Ireland would be I don't know. Northern Irexit? I don't know. Moving on. Oh no. I think it's stuck. Okay, good. Let's talk about the Chinese nationalists. The Chinese nationalists were in power until the communist protests. So Taiwan essentially had to escape to an island. So let's review everything we talked about just now. Do they have a clearly defined territory? Yes, they do, with their capital city being what China calls the whole island, Taipei. Moving on. Do they have a currency? They do have a currency separate from China. Do they have a government? Yes, they do have a government with a president. Do they have a permanent population? Yes, they do have a permanent population. And do any countries recognize them? Essentially, yes, but let's go and think about that a little bit more. So, China. China refuses to have relations with anyone who accepts Taiwan as a country, and China is this huge trading partner. While the US may run on Dunkin', the entire world runs on China, including the US. So, including Dunkin'. Dunkin' Donuts have to, I'm pretty sure they rely on China too. The world runs on China. China really has a huge issue with countries that recognize Taiwan. And while the US keeps informal relations with the ROC, Republic of China, by the way, the Republic of China is not to be confused with the PRC, China, or the People's Republic of China. There's only so many times that you can meet with the Taiwanese president and expect China to just look away. Only very few times, if you're lucky. Here's a little side note. One China, two systems. Should be called One China Macau. 3 systems if we include Macau, not One China Macau systems. Although that's kind of like what they did to Hong Kong. China, Hong Kong, and Macau are special because in order to get into Hong Kong you need a passport, and in order to get into Macau from Hong Kong you need a passport, and in order to get from Macau to China you need a passport. Eventually, but this is all China. But the differences don't end there. They have their own government, culture. They even have this strange accent with different languages, police, infrastructure. These are the most country-like countries that aren't countries. Vatican City has a city in its name, but these. Anyway, we call this One China, Two Systems, or the One China policy. The reason why these are different is because Macau and Hong Kong was owned by the European countries, Macau was owned by the Portuguese, and Hong Kong was owned by the British. I go into a bit more detail, but all you need to know is that for Hong Kong and Macau was on lease to the European countries for 99 years, and then China said your lease is up, and they were like 99 years is basically forever. You can't claim these countries now, sucker. And then they both went to the UN, and then the UN settled things. So now Macau belongs to China. And you know, sometimes they're not too happy with that. With Taiwan being in the background and watching them, Hong Kong is pretty prepared to fight against China. Although, as seen in Tiananmen Square, China's not afraid to back down. China's not going to back down. China's not afraid to take it with force. So, Hong Kong is kind of going to lose here. But, yeah. Palestine. Palestine's pretty interesting. Because, I mean, there's so much history that we're going to completely ignore. There's so much history that I'm kind of sad about this, but we're going to completely, well, not completely, but mostly ignore all that history. So, Palestine doesn't really meet the first requirement of having a territory. Their territories, I'm pretty sure, include the West Bank and Gaza Strip, but are not limited to the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. But Palestine, it's really, we're going to have to talk about some history here. But to be clear, West Bank was originally owned by Jordan, and the Gaza Strip was originally owned by Egypt. Both of them lost to it when they declared war on Israel. So, really, the Arabs were kind of kicked out of the Jewish state, and because they kept fighting, the UN eventually decided to cut that cake. And the Arab and the Jews got this really confusing thought. This was before the Arabs called themselves Palestinians. Moving on, we're not really going to be talking about that, but I really suggest you look that up, and I'm so sad. But I could make an entire episode about that. Please comment whether you want me to make an entire episode about that. Let's talk about this. The Egyptian currencies. Do they have a currency? No. They use the Egyptian currency, the Israeli currency, and the Jordanian currency, and whatever country they live in, because apparently once a Palestinian, always a Palestinian. And that leaves their population at 4 million. Do they have a government? They have a really confusing government, but they do have a seat in the UN. This seat may not vote, but they are allowed to debate in the UN. And what countries recognize Palestine? Well, this map isn't really for just that. If you're wondering what Kosovo state is, I think it's in what we call the Baltic or Slavic states. I think I got that mixed up, but I didn't make an entire video out of that. So, the countries in white that you can barely see, and the countries in blue deny that Palestine is a country. The countries in purple and red completely accept that Palestine is a country. Although I deny that Palestine is a country because they don't have their own currency. Their government's pretty confusing. They barely have any territory or land claims at all. At best, they're a micronation. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Please watch the last episode. And yeah. Or watch the next episode. Or the current episode. Okay. or replay this episode and give me more watch time. Yay!